I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. This morning, we begin with President Trump reviving one of the most controversial policies from his first term. In a proclamation, he announced a full travel ban yesterday, barring foreign nationals from 12 countries from entering the United States. 7 others were placed under partial restrictions. The president said, "We will not allow people to enter our country who wish to do us harm."
This ban targets countries the president has deemed a threat to national security. They're mostly African and Asian countries. Some of the most notable names: Afghanistan, Iran, and much closer to home, Haiti. On top of that, Cuba and Venezuela are on the list of countries facing a partial ban. Announcing the move yesterday, the president referenced this weekend's terror attack in Boulder, Colorado, carried out by a suspect who had overstayed his foreign visa.
The recent terror attack in Boulder, Colorado, has underscored the extreme dangers posed to our country by the entry of foreign nationals who are not properly vetted, as well as those who come here as temporary visitors and overstay their visas. We don't want them.
We have to point out that the attack in Boulder was allegedly carried out by a man from Egypt, a country that is nowhere to be found on either of these lists. The new restrictions are set to take effect on Monday. NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos is standing by with more on how all this could play out in the courts, as this is certain to face legal challenges. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez, though, has the latest from Washington. Let's start with you, Gabe. Tell us more about who will be impacted by these new restrictions and what are some of those exemptions.
Hi there, Joe. Good morning. Well, you laid it out quite well. This involves 12 countries with that full ban. Partial restrictions, though, to 7 other countries. Those 12 countries include Iran, Libya, Afghanistan, which has upset critics of this administration who say Afghanistan should not be on the list, given that so many Afghans helped the U.S. during armed conflicts there. Now, with the other countries that have partial restrictions, that includes Cuba and Venezuela. Now, Joe, this shouldn't come as a surprise to people that have been following this administration. During the campaign, President Trump said repeatedly that he wanted to increase vetting for immigrants coming to the United States. As White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller has repeatedly made the case for this. And earlier on in the administration, the president had signed an executive order essentially ordering the State Department to look at vetting procedures from different countries. But this can be seen, and is being seen by many, as the Trump travel ban 2.0. Now, you'll remember during the first administration, there was a lot of chaos when that first travel ban was enacted that critics called a Muslim ban. However, certain parts of it were later upheld by the Supreme Court. This appears to be the Trump administration learning from that experience and enacting this sweeping ban.
Gabe, I want to go back to the fact, as Joe mentioned, Egypt's not on either of these lists, but the president did open his statement announcing these travel restrictions by referencing this attack in Boulder, Colorado by an alleged Egyptian national. What is the White House saying about how they came up with the list, why the countries that are on it are, and why those that are not are not?
Well, yes, the White House is saying that the timing of this may have something to do, at least a little bit, in terms of moving up the announcement because of that incident in Boulder, Colorado, even though the suspect, again, from Egypt, that country not on this list. But the reason the administration will point out that this was already in the works. This is not something that was just thought of in the last few days. And clearly, from the amount of detail here, this has been in the works for quite some time. And from the early days of this second term, the White House was planning this. Should be interesting, though, in terms of the timing here. This proclamation, as well as several other executive actions late last night, was announced on a day where the news was dominated by that ongoing feud between Elon Musk and the president. So certainly raising a lot of questions about the timing of this. News cycle shifting quite a bit, though.
All right, Gabe, thank you. And you're going to stay with us to help us cover some other news in just a moment. Thank you. But for more on this new travel ban, let's bring back NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos. Danny, good morning. So under the law, how much power does the president have to make a decision like this?
In short, a lot. And we learned that from the first Trump administration in a Supreme Court decision called Trump v. Hawaii, in which you may recall, and it's almost really coming up on 10 years ago now, that the Trump administration the first time around issued a series of these so-called travel bans, retracted them, went back to the drawing board, edited them, sent them back out. But ultimately, what the Supreme Court determined is that the executive has considerable power as long as they show their work properly. And what I mean by that, as long as they tie it to things like national security interests and specific agency action, then these bans may be lawful. If, on the other hand, the ban facially targets things like race, national origin, religion, ethnicity, things like that are likely to make a travel ban less likely to be upheld by the courts. And so the takeaway is that the Trump administration has learned this time around to show their work, to tie it to what the Supreme Court has essentially said would be a lawful exercise of executive power.
Still, Danny, we can expect that there will be legal challenges. What is different this time around? What type of challenges could we see?
The first time around, I would say the travel bans were marked by chaos. They were hastily scribbled out, shoved out into the ether. And that is why the Trump administration the first time around had to keep going back and really literally redlining them, editing them, and putting them back out. This time around, obviously, the administration has read Trump v. Hawaii, and they know that the key is tying it to the executive's broad power when it comes to national security under immigration law. So by tying it and, again, showing their work, because there is something called the Administrative Procedure Act, where if an executive action is arbitrary or capricious or not based on anything, then it's more challengeable. In this case, what we see is the Trump administration has appeared to tie this very specifically to agency action and specific national security interests, essentially identifying what countries have not done their jobs in the Trump administration's view when it comes to national security.
All right, Danny, thank you so much. Appreciate your analysis here. Also this morning, just days after exiting the administration, Elon Musk is now very much at odds with President Trump. A White House official told NBC News the administration is weighing its response after Musk launched a social media campaign against the president's so-called Big Beautiful Bill.
As Republicans race to get the tax cut and spending bill through the Senate and onto the president's desk by July 4th, Musk has been publicly slamming the bill, calling it a pork-filled abomination. House Speaker Mike Johnson downplayed the rift when asked about it yesterday, but he admitted President Trump is not pleased.
Well, I'll tell you, I called Elon last night and he didn't answer, but I hope to talk to him today. I mean, it's not, it's very friendly and we've laughed about our differences on policy before. I'm not upset about this. I talk to President Trump, all the time, multiple times a day. Obviously, we've talked about this. As you know, he's not delighted that Elon did a 180 on that.
All right, let's bring back NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez for more on this story, which Gabe teased earlier. So this breakup between Elon Musk and Mr. Trump is something maybe critics have joked about or at least predicted for a long time. It does look like the relationship is getting rocky, to say the least. Just how far do we think Elon Musk is taking this? And do we know anything else about how the president is responding?
Hi there, Joe. Good morning once again. Yeah, not delighted. House Speaker Mike Johnson, definitely an understatement there. Look, according to a senior White House official that I spoke with yesterday, the president was caught off guard, although not entirely surprised by Elon Musk's opposition to the bill. What is surprising some people at the White House is the forcefulness of his public opposition. You'll remember, Joe and Savannah, that it was just a few days ago, less than a week ago, that President Trump hosted Elon Musk in the Oval Office. He gave him that golden key as he left his time in government service. And now, over the last several days, Elon Musk has been ramping up his attacks. Yesterday, even coming out on social media and urging Americans to call their members of Congress and kill the bill. Now, this is upsetting many people in Trump's orbit, according to multiple sources, although it is notable, Joe and Savannah, that the president, who, of course, is known to go before the cameras pretty much every day, he has not taken questions from reporters since late Friday evening. It's Thursday now, so almost a week that he hasn't held any sort of news availability or press availability. Certainly, as you mentioned in the introduction, the president weighing exactly how to respond directly to Elon Musk. Notable that he hasn't done so yet. He has taken on critics of this so-called Big Beautiful Bill before, including Senator Rand Paul, but has not criticized Elon Musk directly just yet, John Savannah.
And Gabe, I'm wondering right now if we may see more criticism. I mean, as you just mentioned, we've seen resistance to parts of this bill from a handful of Republican senators. Is the criticism that Musk is spewing, is it creating an opening for more people in the party to distance themselves from this bill and put its future ultimately in doubt?
Look, it does give some fiscal conservatives some cover to come out and criticize this bill, perhaps more openly. It remains to be seen, though, whether that will ultimately make any difference in the Senate. Now, there was a group of Republican senators that came to the White House yesterday and spoke with President Trump, the Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, saying that, quote, failure was not an option. Look, the stakes here are incredibly high for President Trump's agenda, and the president knows it. And it will be very interesting to see if Republicans, fiscal conservatives, even though they may have problems with several parts of this bill, whether they will go against the president's wishes, go against the president's agenda. They have not seemed very willing to do that so far at all, really, in this second term.
Yeah, and when we actually talk about the details of the bill, you know, the Congressional Budget Office is out with new estimates for the potential impact if it's enacted as is. What are we learning about how this could impact the deficit and also health insurance coverage?
Well, certainly very significant over the next decade, according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. It says that this bill could potentially add $2.4 trillion to the deficit over the next decade, also potentially cause nearly 11 million Americans to be uninsured over the next decade if this bill passes in its current form. But look, supporters of the bill argue that the Congressional Budget Office has been wrong before and that these projections are off. Still, though, critics using those numbers to point out why Republicans should not back this bill. And certainly Elon Musk is focusing on the deficit argument, although there are some in the White House, some of the bill's supporters that argue that Musk is opposed to this bill because it does away with some tax credits for electric vehicles, which could potentially impact his business, Johnson.
Yeah. All right, Gabe, a lot to cover this morning. Thanks so much.
Yeah, let's dig into these emerging economic implications here of this bill with Investopedia's editor-in-chief, our friend Caleb Silver. Caleb, good morning. So let's start on that estimate there that Gabe just mentioned from the Congressional Budget Office, $2.4 trillion over 10 years added to the debt. What does that mean for our economy, the bond market, Wall Street?
Yeah, the math isn't mathing here because we're just increasing the deficit. And the problem is that we have to pay interest on our debt all the time. That's why you hear the president saying constantly, you got to lower interest rates now because those interest rates are tied to our deficit. So Gabe said it, $2.4 trillion over the next decade, but a loss of $3.7 trillion in revenue. Where's the money going to come from if you're going to extend the tax breaks? Well, the Trump administration would tell you they're going to come from tariffs. Those should, if they go into place as of today with the numbers we're looking at, those should reduce the deficit by $2.8 trillion, but they're not going to go into place the way they are today. So we're looking at a mounting deficit, which is why you see this big sell-off in the dollar and in our treasury bonds. We are going to have to pay more and more to service our debt as a country, and that takes money away from spending.
Speaking of numbers, we have some eye-opening jobs numbers. Yesterday, we learned private sector hiring rose by just 37,000 in May. That comes from the payrolls processing firm ADP. It was well below forecast, the lowest monthly job total since March 2023. Why the slump here, and what is that telling us just about the overall health of our economy?
Yeah, we like to look at private payrolls because we do get that jobs report. We're going to get it tomorrow, actually, for the month of May, but they take that in the first half of the month. Private payrolls are private companies reporting how many people they're actually taking on board. It's a little more exact, and that's a very weak number when you think about the strength of the economy going into this year. So that's a really low number, and it's the first sort of hiccup we've seen in the jobs market. Again, tomorrow is the May jobs report. We'll also get the unemployment rate. That's been holding at 4.2%. Companies have basically not been firing a lot of people, but we know the hiring has been slowing. And the Federal Reserve came out with its beige book yesterday. It's actually red, but it's the beige book. And it said that companies are increasing prices, slowing down their hiring, and they're seeing slowing growth. So we're starting to see the first impacts of these tariffs, whether they are real or they are still in flux. They are affecting companies' ability to hire and spend money.
Caleb, we also heard the president once again call for the Fed Chair Jerome Powell to lower interest rates. This has been going on for quite some time now. Why is the president wanting to cut them, and then why is the Fed not cutting them? Remind us.
Yeah, well, Fed Chair Powell and the president allegedly met last week, and the Fed Chair said, we're not going to be influenced by politics, but Trump said yesterday in one of his posts, too late, Powell, you got to lower interest rates now because the private hiring was so weak. If you lower interest rates, you make money cheaper, companies can spend more, borrow more, but it also, the key thing is that it reduces those interest payments on our debt. That's holding back the government from doing a lot of the spending that it wants to do. Lower interest rates lowers that bill, but the Fed chair is not going to do it. We have a Fed meeting in 13 days, 6 hours and 50 minutes. Doesn't look like the Fed's lowering rates at that meeting.
All right, Caleb, thank you.
Now, the Trump administration's battle with elite colleges is escalating this morning. The Department of Education is threatening to take away Columbia University's accreditation. It claims the school is in violation of federal anti-discrimination laws for failing to protect Jewish students.
Yeah, the decision means Columbia could lose their eligibility for federal student loans or Pell Grants. Now, back in April, the president announced he was targeting the accreditation process for several Ivy League schools and that some could lose those certifications.
For more, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Maya Eglin. She's at Columbia and joins us with the latest. Maya, good morning. So first, help us understand just what the Trump administration is claiming Columbia did to violate federal anti-discrimination laws.
Yeah, good morning, Joe and Savannah. So this letter from the Department of Education was actually to Columbia's accreditation body, Middle States Commission on Higher Education. And they're saying that they believe Columbia University is in violation of these federal anti-discrimination laws for its treatment of Jewish students and the Jewish community. The statement reads in part, accreditors have an enormous public responsibility as gatekeepers of federal student aid, just as the Department of Education has an obligation to uphold federal anti-discrimination law. University accreditors have an obligation to ensure member institutions are abiding by their standards. So this treatment of Jewish students is really all surrounding everything that happened following the October 7th attacks in Israel, the ongoing pro-Palestinian movement here on campus and at Columbia. Now, this does not mean that Columbia has lost its accreditation yet, but now the accreditation body is going to have to meet with leadership here at the university and kind of review the evidence before a final decision is made. Joan, Savannah?
Maya, didn't Columbia address a lot of these concerns back in March that the Trump administration had? Why is this being pursued now?
Yeah, so as you just mentioned, Savannah, back in March, Columbia actually agreed to a lot of the demands that the Trump administration had in order to try and get back the $400 million of federal funding that they lost. So we know that the university has been in close conversation with the Trump administration. We actually got a response from Columbia yesterday, reading in part, quote, Columbia is aware of the concerns raised by the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights to our accreditor. Columbia is deeply committed to combating anti-Semitism on our campus. We take this issue seriously and are continuing to work with the federal government to address it. If Columbia were to lose their accreditation status, this would have a ripple effect, mainly impacting students, including, as you mentioned, Savannah, at the top, a loss of federal student loans and Pell Grants, which could deeply impact even the future students here at Columbia.
And Maya, this isn't the only institution being targeted. Yesterday, President Trump said his administration plans to deny visas for international students trying to come to the U.S., specifically to attend Harvard. A lot of tension between Trump and Harvard. Didn't a federal judge already block a similar move last month?
Yeah, so last month there was a federal judge who blocked the Trump administration's attempt to completely ban international students, essentially trying to take away Harvard's ability to give out these international student visas. That ban, the block from the federal judge, put a hold on this and really sent everything to the courts in order to try and prolong this process. But the proclamation yesterday that President Trump gave out is actually a 6-month ban, specifically targeting new international students and their admission into Harvard. It's also going to give the Trump administration the ability to review the current legal status of students who are already there. And President Trump said he made this decision to protect the security of our country. He says security concerns were his main motivation here. Savannah and Joe.
Maya, thank you.
Well, Nebraska is now the newest state to ban transgender students from competing in girls' sports, joining 24 states with similar bans. Governor Jim Pillen signed the measure into law Wednesday, joined by Republican lawmakers and supporters. It passed by a single vote last week after lawmakers dropped a proposal to also ban transgender students from certain bathrooms. Opponents call the law discriminatory, noting fewer than 10 transgender students have participated in school sports in Nebraska in the last decade.
On Thursday, police at New York City's JFK Airport took a man into custody for his alleged connection to a car bombing last month in California. 4 people were injured outside a fertility clinic in Palm Springs. That man now facing charges for providing large amounts of chemicals to the bomber who was killed in the incident. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock has more.
Several weeks after a man detonated a bomb at this Southern California fertility clinic, killing himself and injuring 4 others in what the FBI called an act of terrorism, a second person is now behind bars. 32-year-old Daniel Park, detained at JFK Airport in New York. and accused of providing material support to the bomber Guy Edward Barkis.
Law enforcement learned that Park spent approximately 2 weeks visiting Barkis's residence, running experiments in Barkis's garage.
In the criminal complaint, the government says Park shipped approximately 275 pounds of ammonium nitrate, an explosive precursor used to make homemade bombs, to Barkis. And they say they recovered handwritten notes of chemical explosive equations, including one related to the deadly bombing of a federal building 30 years ago.
Park was in possession of an explosive recipe that was similar to the Oklahoma City bombing.
Both men, police say, held twisted anti-life ideology dating back about a decade, which may have connected them online.
They don't believe that people should exist.
Police also say Park bought a plane ticket to Poland in cash 4 days after the bombing and burned some of his clothing before being picked up by authorities in Warsaw and sent back to the U.S. to face prosecution.
Our thanks to Sam Brock for that report. Court documents say the bomber used an AI chat program to try and maximize the lethality of the bomb. Police say it is the second time this year a high-profile bombing has been linked to searches using publicly available AI.
Another round of severe weather hit the Midwest on Wednesday, bringing funnel clouds and flash flood warnings. This morning, the threat of strong storms with damaging hail is moving eastward. NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster has the latest from Missouri.
Another round of severe weather and at least one funnel cloud captured on camera threatening the Midwest.
A new tornado warning just issued.
Flash flood warnings and tornado sirens blaring in and around St. Louis. Grocery shoppers sheltering in place and trees toppled over. Less than 3 weeks after an EF3 tornado ripped through the city.
We're in the tornado! Oh!
Killing 5 people after the sirens weren't activated. St. Louis police warning structures damaged in that storm are not safe to seek shelter in. The new threat coming after a deadly night of storms further south. Dallas fire teams say a rescue boat flipped, throwing first responders into fast-moving waters as they tried to save a driver overnight.
Thankfully, even though they got swept downstream, they were able to make it to safe refuge.
After waiting for the water levels to recede, those responders found one man dead inside a vehicle. The flooding was part of a system that brought torrential downpours and 2 tornadoes to the Kansas City area. The National Weather Service assessing the trail of fallen trees in towns like Independence, Missouri.
I can say with confidence that we have at least one tornado path, damage path here through Independence.
How serious of a tornado?
It's at least a low NDF1.
This new video shows the funnel cloud approaching an engineering building that a tree hit as J.C. Mason was working inside.
It was crazy. When we heard that crash, it was big. It shook the building a little bit.
Hazy skies from Wisconsin and Michigan to New York City as smoke from more than 100 out-of-control Canadian wildfires billows into the U.S., resulting in a code red air quality alert for swaths of the northern Midwest.
All right, Shaq, thank you so much. The threat of dangerous storms not done yet.
Angie Lassman's monitoring another active day of weather for us. Hey, Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning to you. And it's not just today. It's the next couple of days that we have that chance of severe weather. We'll give you the breakdown here in a moment. But let's start with what we're dealing with right now. We've got multiple areas that are waking up to some rain and some thunderstorms. One of those spots stretching from the Tennessee Valley just north up into portions of Michigan. That's got some thunder and lightning associated with it. And similar story for northern Texas and parts of southern Oklahoma. Those are just a couple of spots along with parts of the southeast, specifically the Carolinas, that are dealing with a bit of wet weather this morning. As far as the severe weather goes, it's mainly going to be centered across parts of the southern plains later today. Really goes this afternoon into this evening from southern portions of Kansas, stretching down to southern portions of Texas. So we've got Oklahoma City and Amarillo right in the bullseye of that. It's the winds, it's the hail that we're going to mainly look for. But of course, a couple of tornadoes will be likely as well. Tomorrow, looking ahead to the end of your work week, we'll have kind of a larger area that has a risk for some severe weather. And we'll see this front kind of pop up some of those storms, mainly from anywhere from Oklahoma to Maine. But we're looking at supercells to be likely anywhere from Colorado to the Texas Panhandle. So that's where you'll see the strongest of those storms. A little bit of rain focused across parts of the Northeast as well. But this is the severe weather area for your Friday plans, especially if you're going to be outside anywhere from Nashville to Amarillo. Now, looking ahead to your Saturday, we get a big batch of moisture that's going to work across parts of the Northeast. That's where we'll see wet weather. We'll see some thunderstorms across parts of the Southeast. And that's kind of the same general area that will have that severe risk for our Saturday as well. Big picture look of your temperatures. Boy, is it hot across the Northeast. These are the warmest temperatures of the year so far, and the warmest of the week will happen today. 93 degrees in Hartford, 90 degrees in New York City. We could see a couple of record highs across this region with upper 80s for Philadelphia as well. Tomorrow, not quite as warm for at least not as quite of a large area, but still 84 degrees in New York City. We'll see those 70s across parts of Vermont. We've got the 80s for Pittsburgh. And then, guys, as we get into the weekend, we get back to normal, which is always a good thing. And I feel like I never get to say that. It's been either cooler than normal or warmer than normal. So
if you never get to say normal, then what is normal?
Exactly. Yes.
An
and
existential
that's on climate
question.
change.
Don't get me started.
Thank you, Angie.
You got it.